Almost a year after Nvidia launched its flagship RTX 3060, 3070, 3080 and 3090 cards, the 3080 Ti has arrived. Nvidia has designed this GPU to sit in between the RTX 3080 and RTX 3090 when it comes to its performance and specs. Gigabyte offers a gaming OC model of the 3080 Ti, which is what I'm covering in this review. This card is a sort of advancement over the Founders Edition, as Gigabyte has slightly tweaked the performance to pump out a little bit more juice out of this GPU. A brief rundown of the specs of the Gigabyte 3080 Ti reveals its 12 gigs of GDDR6X RAM, 10 240 CUDA cores, a memory clock of 19,000 MHz, 384-bit memory bus, and a TDP of 360 watts. It also comes packed with Gigabyte's WindForce cooling system, requires at least a 750 watt power supply, and packs 3 DisplayPort 1.4a ports and 2 HDMI 2.1 ports. You'll also need 2 PCIe 8-pin connectors to power this beast. For starters, it is important to note that this Gigabyte GeForce RTX 3080 Ti OC GPU packs 12 gigs of VRAM, which is only 2 more than the RTX 3080, but half of that in the 3090. If you want the best of the best, you'll still need the 3090 to get it, but of course will cost you a lot more money. Also, keep in mind that the sheer amount of VRAM on these GPUs are still not utilized by the games on the market yet. If you're into heavy workstation loads, then that's a different story, so keep that in mind when shopping around. Just because 24 gigs of VRAM is the most, doesn't mean you need all of it. The big difference between the Gigabyte RTX 3080 Ti version and the base GPU can be found in some of the specs. A base 3080 Ti comes with 1665 MHz boost clock and a memory speed of 1188 MHz. This model comes with 1710 MHz boost clock. Any gamer will love the overall design of the Gigabyte GeForce RTX 3080 Ti. While not as uniform and sleek as the Founders Edition, this GPU is massive. It is also very long due to the third fan on it. However, the higher clock speeds on the GPU really heavily rely on this cooling. The GPU features a gunmetal grey style design with no color on it at all. Of course, that changes a lot when you power it up and the RGB is activated. The GPU includes one strip of RGB that is found on the logo. It can be tweaked and changed using the RGB Fusion 2.0 software. It also goes without saying that it also syncs up with your other Gigabyte hardware that you have in your PC. In my case, this is the RAM, motherboard and GPU. My PC is slowly becoming a Gigabyte dream and I love to see it. The overall design is also very clean, although there are some heat pipes that show depending on how you look at it. I won't say it is the best and most stylish GPU on the market, but it works. The button metal plate hides most of the chips away and the fans are visible enough to clean when needed. It is also important to state that this card doesn't come with a mount. I thought it would be an issue at first, but it took up 2 great spots on my NZXT Hero H510 case, and after installing the card, it was surprisingly sturdy. There isn't much else to speak about when it comes to design. A big push for this card is its cooling. Gigabyte included an extra fan on this GPU to help with the higher clock speeds, so putting it to the test meant monitoring how hot this card got while maxing out the performance. It is also important to compare these scores with the RTX 3080 because right now that GPU is your closest purchase option. For the most part, the performance tests were great, but at the same time in line with the RTX 3080, so it kinda makes this RTX 3080 Ti a hard sell. Don't get me wrong, the 3080 Ti outclasses the standard version, but the gap isn't big enough to warrant the price difference. You need to be going into this purchase with your eyes on the RTX 3080 Ti from the start and not deciding between the two. I ran some tests using the following PC build and got someone to test the same games using their RTX 3080. I only own a 1080 Ti like a peasant. The scores I got were as follows. The results do speak for themselves. The Gigabyte RTX 3080 Ti is a beastly card. With the right PC, you can easily get above 60 FPS on 4K max settings on some of the most graphically intense games around. When enabling ray tracing on these games, the frames do half most of the time. We saw this on games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Watch Dogs. It was also a clean half drop in average FPS. However, thanks to DLSS, this also increased the frames across various tests. We say Watch Dogs jumped up 10 average frames when using DLSS on 4K with ray tracing on. It is mad to see how demanding ray tracing can actually be. Can the Gigabyte RTX 3080 Ti be overclocked to get even more performance? Most definitely. Using Afterburner, one could tweak the PC to output a little bit more power here, but don't expect it to drastically change your performance. It increased the core voltage by 50, increased the power limiter, and added a bit more clocks to the GPU. In the end, I saw about a 4 to 7 frame boost across all tests. Watch Dogs went from 60 FPS to 64. Other games also saw slight jumps. As for the cooling of the GPU, the 3 fans make a pretty decent thermal system. While idle, the card sat at about 34 degrees Celsius, with a mid 68 degree max mark during the most intense test environments. Keep in mind that it is winter in South Africa and quite chilly at about 18 degrees. As for thermal throttling, the Gigabyte RTX 3080 Ti, when pushed to the limit, seems to throttle at around 1980 MHz. Gigabyte has quite a hefty GPU on its hands here. The cooling is impressive, and the overclocking features mean you can get about an extra 5% of power out of this card. At the same time, it acts as a nice middle ground between the 3090 and standard 3080. You really don't need 24 GB of VRAM for gaming, so this is a great option. Still, it is hella expensive and very hard to find. You could always just wait for the Aorus model to arrive and see how that performs. But that's going to be all our thoughts on the Gigabyte RTX 3080 Ti Gaming OC GPU. What do you guys think? Is this something you want to pick up? Let us know down below. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. And until next time, farewell.